Hello and good morning, good afternoon to everybody, wherever you are. Hopefully lots of people watching us all around the world. For those that don't know, my name is Simon Jones. I am the CEO of Helping Rhinos, based in the UK. And this is our first live stream event, so welcome along. We have a few more planned, and I'll talk to you about a little bit more about those later on. But this first one is all about our Rhino Orphans. So our Rhino Orphans at the Zululand Rhino Orphanage. And I'm joined today by Meg and Julia. So I don't know whether anyone else is getting some feedback. I'm getting quite a lot of feedback, so hopefully you guys are not. So I will continue. So hopefully you can hear me without the feedback. And so I was talking about the orphans of the Zululand Rhino Orphanage, and we will be meeting them in more detail a little bit later on. But let me start before all of that by saying that I hope all of you watching us here today are well and surviving the lockdown. I think this sort of global lockdown, thanks to the COVID pandemic, is really driving lots of different organizations to turn to online events to keep us in your thoughts while you're stuck at home. The impact of the lockdown has been huge on conservation generally, and particularly in the projects that we work with and the Rhino Orphans. And Meg from the orphanage will talk to you a little bit more around that later on. But we thought this was a great opportunity to bring our Rhino Orphans to you. So as well as hearing from me and the orphans today, you're going to be hearing from Meg, who is on the advisory board of the Zululand Rhino Orphanage, and until recently was day-to-day at the orphanage itself. So Meg is really well placed to talk to us about some of those challenges that the orphanage faces, particularly when we're taking in new orphans. I'm also going to hear from Julia, who's the orphanage coordinator, and Julia has the pleasure of looking after the rhinos and caring for the rhinos on a day-to-day basis, which sounds very glamorous, and I know lots of people think it's their ideal job. But what you'll hear from Julia is how it is an ideal job and it's a perfect job, but it certainly has its tough moments as well. So without further ado, what I'm going to do now is hand over to Meg to explain a little bit around what's going on at the orphanage at the moment.
Thank you very much, Simon, and it's great to be here today to join you in this live event, the Zululand Rhino Orphanage, the Zululand Conservation Trust, and Helping Rhinos. So just to tell you a little bit more about the Zululand Rhino Orphanage, we are a dedicated and specialized facility, and this facility was set up to help the rhino owners in South Africa to care for orphaned and injured rhino calves. It's quite a sad story, and unfortunately, with poaching being on the rise for a number of years now, we're left with little rhino calves that fall victim to poaching incidents. And this unfortunately happens when the mothers are poached and they leave behind little rhino calves that are too young to cope in the wild without their mothers. So not only that, but also injured rhino calves that are too young or too vulnerable to look after themselves in the wild. And that is what our facility does. We take in these little rhino calves and we give them a safe place and a safe space to grow and get to a point where they are ready to be released back into the wild. And that is so important. That is our main goal, is to return them back into the wild where they can live out a full life being a rhino and contributing back to the wild population. And this is only really possible with an organization like you guys at Helping Rhinos and all the people that donate and support us. It's a very costly process, and yeah, it wouldn't be possible without relationships like ours. You know, having a relationship with Helping Rhinos and reaching international an international, you know, audience and people that donate, and especially through our adoptions with Helping Rhinos. We are not in this alone. There are many other rhino orphanages in South Africa, which is very sad, and it shows you that the need for rhino orphanages is very real. And we're very lucky that we have good relationships with these orphanages, and we share, you know, we share our findings, and we work together to fight this fight and save as many lives as possible.
Thanks, Meg. Yeah, no, thanks. And we're really proud to be working with you guys at Zululand Rhino Orphanage. It's, I think, you know, every rhino counts in this really tough time that we're living through, even pre-COVID, you know, with the poaching crisis we've been going through. So it's imperative that we do have facilities like the Zululand Rhino Orphanage that help care for and protect those little babies and get them back out into the wild, and we'll see some of that examples of that later on. But Meg did mention that one thing that we do work with is adoption. So you will see during the course of this video often a little sort of adoption square come up. So if you do feel motivated and inspired to want to adopt one of these little babies we're going to introduce you to today, then there's a couple of ways you can do that. If you're watching on Facebook and YouTube, there's a link that you can click on that will take you to the adoption page. Or if you're watching on a computer and you have your phone handy, you can just turn on your camera and scan the QR code that will be on the screen, and that will take you straight and allow you to do an adoption there. So so enjoy with the footage, but if you feel you can, then we'd love you to adopt and play your part in helping get these little babies back out into the wild. So what does that really look like? I want to just show you a little video of Banoi and Kula, which are two of the orphans that Julia will introduce us to shortly. But this gives you a little bit of an insight into what goes on day to day at the orphanage.
Hi, I'm Julia and this is Jabu. We're two of the caretakers here at the Zululand Rhino Orphanage, and we're just going to prepare the milk for Banoi now. So we just start by measuring out the milk. So we do this with an electric scale just to be as accurate as possible. And at the moment he's getting just over 300 grams of the powder. So the powder that we use is actually a full milk, so it's a powder made for baby horses. And then we just add Protexin to our milk. So Protexin is just a general probiotic. So it's just good to give this to the animals just to give them a bit of a boost. And if they're still on milk, we're able to give it to them easily. Next thing we do is we just check the temperature of the water. We try and get it as close to the mother's milk as possible. It just makes our babies a lot more comfortable, and they take the bottle a lot easier, especially if they're a new baby. And then we'll just add in our milk powder mixture and mix it up. And then once it's mixed, we just pour it into his bottle for him. And now our last part is just to take the milk down to Banoi to feed him. Down in our boma now where our rhinos are, so we're just going to walk down into the bushes and find where Banoi and Kula are. So they spend their day out in the bushes, and once it's feed time we just like to go and find them so we can call them up for their milk.
Banoi! Oh, they're over there.
Oh.
Come Banoi!
Come boys, come!
Kula! Come babies!
Come boys, come! With Kula and Banoi, So Benoit is 14 months, so he's still getting milk 4 times a day. And Fula's just over 2 years, so he's off his milk, but he gets pellets every time we feed Benoit, just so he doesn't get jealous.
Okay, so I hope that gives you a little bit of an insight into what goes on at the orphanage day to day. And you saw Julia and Jabul there. But now I'm pleased that we have Julia live with us from the orphanage, although she is inside because the Wi-Fi signal is not great at the orphanage. So we did try a few experiments having her out and wandering about, but we kept losing her a lot. So Julia's inside. So welcome, Julia, and tell us a little bit around what you what happens each day for you.
Awesome, thank you very much, Simon. Yeah, it's unfortunate that I have to be inside for the live stream, but at least I do still get to join you guys. So as Simon mentioned, I'm the orphanage coordinator, and so I do spend a daily basis at the orphanage, which I'm very lucky to be able to do that. So just a little bit about my day-to-day job, basically. So as the orphanage coordinator, basically my duty is to make sure our orphans are there and getting well taken care of. So I do live on site with our other Rhino carers. It's quite strange to say I'm happy that it's winter at the moment, but luckily with it being winter, I have a bit of a later start in my morning, so I get to start at 7 o'clock, whereas in summer we'll start anywhere between 5 and 5:30 in the morning. So a typical day for me, like what my day kind of looks like, is I'll wake up and I'll start preparing the milk. So at the moment we do have one calf that is still on milk. She gets fed milk 4 times a day. So her first feed is at 7 o'clock in the morning. We'll feed her. After that, we'll let them outside into their larger outside boma. So just for security reasons, our rhinos do stay in a smaller, more very well protected area for the evening, and then they're out still in a protected boma, but a larger, more natural area during the day. So at 7 o'clock, after Zimmy gets her first bottle of milk, well, she doesn't actually get a bottle. As you'll see in our videos later, she drinks out of a bucket at the moment. But she gets that. We then let all of the rhinos outside into their larger boma. And then pretty much what I think a lot of people forget is one of the biggest parts of my job, which comes next, is the cleaning. So we do clean the inside bomas. So this includes raking up all of the dung, all of the old hay, anything that they've made a mess with, and just make sure it's nice and clean for them when they come back in the afternoons. And then we'll also weigh out hay for them, teff and lucerne, they dry feed, and just get that prepared for the rest of the day. Then Zimmy will get fed again at 10 o'clock and again at 1 o'clock. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon is when we go down to feed our hippos. So Charlie and Moomin just get their teff and lucerne. We make sure they've got fresh water and all of that, make sure that they're doing well. And then typically the rhinos come back inside their nighttime bomas between 4:30 and 5:30 in the afternoon. This is when Zimmy will get her last milk feed. And then they do get additional grass feeds throughout the night. At the moment, our last feed is somewhere between 6 and 8 o'clock, depending on how much grass they decide to eat. Yeah, and then we're lucky at the moment, that's kind of when our day ends and we, as the carers, have a little bit of time to relax. But of course, if we do have a young baby or a new calf come in, then we often have carers pulling 20-hour shifts and being awake throughout the night to look after a small calf.
Great, thanks, Julia. And we'll come back to you a little bit later on. So when we first started talking about doing this live stream, as we mentioned earlier, we the hope was we would have Julia now roaming around the rhinos, but we didn't want to take that risk of not having any signals. So what we've got is we're going to introduce all of the rhinos to you via this video clip with Julia, and then we'll come back to Julia and Meg, and we'll have a bit of a Q&A after this. So enjoy. Here are our Rhino Orphans.
Hi, so I'm here with Zimi Sile. We call her Zimi for short. She's the youngest of our orphans that we have at the moment, and she's around 10-11 months old. So a little bit about Zimi's story. Zimi came to us between 6 and 7 months old, after her mom had actually died of natural causes. So what happened is her mom had a wound. Her mom had a wound on her side, either from another rhino or potentially from fighting with an elephant, and this wound got infected, causing her mom to die of septicemia. As you can see, Zimi drinks out of a bucket. So although she's adapted to drinking her milk nicely with us, she doesn't want to accept the bottle, but she's more than happy drinking her milk out of the bucket, which we're really, really happy about. And she gets along super nicely with our other babies, even though there is a bit of an age gap, so we're very happy about that too. Cool, so I'm here with another 3 of our orphans. At the back we've got Nkosi. She's our oldest girl, she's just over 4 years now. In the middle we've got little Banoi. Banoi is our second youngest, he's about 1 year 9 months. And then in the front here we've got Mpilo, and Mpilo's just under 3 years old. So a little bit about their stories. We'll start at the back. So Makosi, she was actually born during a drought. And so what happened was her mom was unable to produce milk. When they noticed that this calf wasn't able to get milk and was very weak and small, they decided to bring her in when she was only about 3 days old. Banoi and Mpilo have a little bit of a sadder story. They're both poaching survivors. Both of their mothers got poached. Mpilo was a little bit luckier as he didn't get hurt himself, whereas Banoi, he came in when he was about 4 months old and actually had wounds along his back. So what the poachers often do is when they're trying to get the horn off of the mother's body, the babies often try and defend the mother and try and chase the poachers off. So they try and hack them with either a panga or an axe, and they try and go for their spine, because what the poachers do is they try and paralyze the baby. And so when Banoi came in at 4 months old, he had a lot of wounds down his spine that we had to treat. And Mpilo came in when he was 10 months old. The challenges with Mpilo being so much older was it was quite hard to work with him at the beginning, and it took about 3 weeks before we were actually able to get him on milk and get close enough to him to interact with him. Okay, so I'm here with Kula, and Banoi is also snuck in as well as Zimi at the end. But I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Kula's story. Kula is 2 years and 8 months old now. His story is similar to that of Makosi. So he was born during a drought. His mom actually had tumors on her teeth and so was unable to feed him. And that's when he got rescued. Kula was about 2 days old when he got rescued, and he was actually so desperate for milk that he just walked up to the rescue team and they were able to pick him up and put him on the back of the vehicle. Hey, my boy. But as you can see, he's been doing wonderfully. He's great friends with all of our other rhinos. A lot of people who have been following us on social media for a long time know him because he used to be best friends with a goat named Buzzy. But as you can see, he's upgraded to rhino friends and he's doing wonderfully in our crash. Cool, so I'm here with Charlie and Moomin, our 2 orphan hippos. As you can see, they're just busy enjoying their lunch, which is Kef and Lucerne. Charlie's the bigger guy on this side closest to me. So Charlie's story is, when he was about 3 days old, he was actually found by himself in Richards Bay. So we're not actually sure exactly what happened, whether his mom died or if maybe his mom abandoned him, but he was found completely by himself walking the streets of a small city. And that is when he got brought in with us. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of you might know him because he actually used to be best friends with Nkosi. There are a lot of clips on YouTube of a baby rhino and a baby hippo playing together, and that is our famous Charlie. Charlie is now just over 4 years old, so he is about the same age as our rhino Makosi. And then you've got little Moomin next to him. Moomin's just over 3 years old. Moomin, when she was about 2 or 3 months old, her mom died of natural causes. We're not sure exactly what happened. And she was actually found in the Eastern Cape. So she spent her first few months at a facility down in the Eastern Cape. Once we decided that Charlie should no longer be acting like a hippo and we needed to, should be acting like a rhino, and we needed to find him a hippo friend. We reached out to other facilities and tried to see if anyone had another hippo, and that's when we found out about Moomin, and we actually made the 26-hour drive to bring her up here, and as you can see, it's worked wonderfully. They are now best friends, and Charlie is finally learning how to be a hippo.
Thanks for that, Julia. Those are beautiful videos. And then next up, we have a very special rhino, Storm, who was at our facility for a few years, and now he's been released back into the wild. Beautiful black rhino, and Julia is going to introduce you to our Stormy boy.
Awesome, thanks, Megs. So as Megan mentioned, Storm has been released back into the wild, so that's why we're doing his introduction a little bit different to the other guys. We obviously don't see him every day or interact with him every day, so I couldn't take a video up close to him like all of our other orphans. Storm is just under 5 years old now, and he's been released about just over a year ago now, so he's doing wonderfully, adapting wonderfully. A little bit about Storm's story. So Storm was found when he was about 2 or 3 months old. He was found completely by himself, so they're not 100% sure what happened to his mom, although we do suspect that she was poached, unfortunately. And I think a lot of people, the most common question I get about Storm is his name, because unlike all of our other babies who have Zulu names, he has quite a more simple name. And so his little backstory about his name is that when he was rescued in the middle of a very hectic, strong storm. And so just that whole journey and rescue mission to get him just stuck in everyone's heart. So we did decide to name him Storm after that. But yeah, as you can see in the video, he is doing wonderfully out in the wild now. We do still follow up on him. We see him about once or twice a month, but we do try and leave him to be as natural and wild as possible.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Julia, and thanks, Megan. Yeah, and Julia, thanks for introducing all of our amazing little rhino orphans. As we said, it makes such a difference when the species as a whole is under such threat that we need to protect each and every one of them. So I hope everybody has a bit of a better feeling and understanding of our orphans and a bit of the story behind them. You know, some have obviously got very sad stories, you know, having lost their mums at an early age. So what we're going to do now, we had some questions in advance come in, so we're going to look at our sort of questions and now to both Julia and Meg. And I guess, Julia, let me start with you and say, what question we've been asked quite a few times is, do they recognize you? So do the Rhino Orphans recognize you as individuals, or do they, you know, are you just another person cleaning out their enclosure?
That is definitely a good question. So I wouldn't go as far as to say that they recognize individual people the same way that we would recognize each other, but they do tend to pick up on people that they're used to and people that they see regularly. So they definitely seem to recognize us as their carers, not so much by the way we look, but more, and facial recognition, but more so from our smell and especially the way we sound and the way that they get used to how we call them individually.
Okay, very, very interesting. And obviously, you know, you're, as we've just seen in the videos, you're up close and personal with these rhinos. You know, obviously much more so when they first come in, before you need to withdraw a bit, as we've seen with some of them, and then Storm. But even just having the opportunity to get that close isn't something that many people have, you know, will get to experience. And so many people will ask us, what does a rhino skin and even a hippo skin feel like?
Yes, that's definitely a question I get a lot as well. So I do kind of have a bit of a practiced answer for it. So starting off with the rhino skin, if you think of an avocado, think of an avocado skin that has, or avocado that has smooth to about medium rough skin. I would say that's what I would compare a rhino skin to. And then for hippos, I would say wet rubber is what they would feel like. Specifically their ears, I think a lot of people just love hippo ears. So the best analogy me and the team here have come up with is if you take marshmallows and you leave them in the fridge for at least a day, so they become a little bit more firm than what they normally are. That is what a hippo's ear feels like.
Okay, so there you go. I can see everybody now rushing to the supermarkets to buy marshmallows. Put them in the fridge.
Marshmallows and avocados.
If we have lockdown shortages of marshmallows and avocados, we know who to come to pay for that. But that's really interesting, and I think it's really good to give that sort of something that people can relate to, because as you said, it's not always possible to have everybody being able to come up and and touch a hippo skin in that way. But Meg, let me ask you. So obviously, the orphanage is dealing with very traumatized rhinos when they come in. But if all things are if there isn't that trauma and they're in the wild, how do the rhinos live in the wild? Do they live in groups, or do they live more on their own?
So a little bit of both, actually. Normally the males are solitary. So the bulls, the big adult males, will sort of wander around on their own, and then they find groups of females when they come into estrus. So when the females come into estrus, then you'll see the adult bulls joining up with the females. The females are a little bit more social. You find them in groups of a couple of older females with their offspring. So small groups of 3 or 4 rhino up to 6 to 10 animals at a time. There's no real given number, but yes, these groups are called crashes, which is quite appropriate given the size of a rhino and the way they go crashing through the bushes. So a group of rhinos, a crash, and typically made up of females and their offspring, then joined by older bulls when the females come into estrus. The black rhinos are a little bit more solitary, so normally you'll see a cow and a calf, or males on their own. But in general, they are quite social animals.
Great, thanks, Meg. So I guess in general, if you see a group of rhinos together and you're not sure whether it's black or white rhino, the chances are a bigger group is going to be a white rhino crash. And as you say, black rhinos are definitely more solitary and definitely more aggressive. I know someone said to me once, if you get charged by a white rhino, try and get out the way up a tree or into some bushes, and it'll probably just keep charging past you. Whereas a black rhino will probably charge past you, turn around and have a go from the other side as well. So interesting. But and I guess on that, Julia, so we talked a bit then around what happens in the wild, assuming that they don't need rescuing. But at what age would a baby typically leave its mum in the wild?
So typically in the wild, a rhino would separate from its mom somewhere between 3.5 and 4.5 years old. And then just following on that is then when we would try and release our rhinos from the orphanage. We would try and release them back into the wild between 3.5 and 4.5 years old, just to keep it as natural as possible.
Okay, so a rhino mum is only typically would have one calf, and so I guess with a gestation period between 15 and 16 months, and then the calf stays with the mum for 3 years, we can see that the breeding cycle is quite a long cycle in terms of trying to bring that population up following that poaching crisis. But so we saw Zimmy, for example, when you were introducing them to us, and we then saw, you know, the other rhinos together. So do you have to keep them when they come into the orphanage? Do you need to keep the new orphans separate to the others? And then when would you start to introduce them to the other rhinos?
Okay, yes. So there definitely isn't a simple or straightforward answer or time period that I can give you for all of these. There's a lot of things we do have to consider when introducing a new calf to the rest of our orphans. So first off, typically if we have a new arrival, we'll keep it quarantined for at least the first week. And this is just to protect both them from anything they could get from our rhinos, as well as anything they might have we don't want to give to the current calves. Then I think the most important thing to look at before or when deciding when to introduce them to the rest of them would be their age and as well as their size. Both of the new calf and the calves we currently have, and specifically the age gap or the size difference between them. So normally this process of introducing the new arrival to the rest of our crash can be anything from as little as 1 week to up to a couple of months. If we look at our current setup, Zimmy being our youngest calf, and she's 10 months old, let's say we got a new calf in that was, 1 month, 2 months old, this baby would simply be too small to be able to safely introduce it to rhinos that we currently have. In a situation like that, we would look at an alternative companion. So something like we've done in the past with Kula is the goat, for example. We wouldn't want to leave a baby by itself, but if we aren't able to introduce it to our rhinos straight away, we would look at alternative options.
Okay, thanks, Julia. So when the orphans are there, obviously whether they're on their own or after they've been introduced or they've got a friend like Boozy, how much milk typically would you expect an orphan to drink, I guess, every single day?
Okay, so this also isn't just a simple I can give you numbers answer. We do take into consideration both the age of the baby and the weight of the baby. So between 13 and 21 weeks, when a baby would typically weigh around 175 to 235 kilos, this is the period in which they drink the most amount of milk, and that can be up to 25 liters a day. And pretty much from this stage, they start to get weaned off, so they will drink less and less until they're completely off milk at 18 months. I think Zimmy is our best example at the moment because we have her drinking milk currently. So Zimmy's around 10 months old and she is around 450 kilos and she's drinking around 14 liters a day at the moment.
Okay, great. So that's a lot of milk, and I know from having looked at the numbers, it costs a good few £1,000s per month just to care for each individual rhino when they come in. And obviously when they come in, we've typically got vet bills and medications that need to be covered, as well as the food and everything as well. So it is an ongoing challenge for helpers to raise the funds. So I know the adoption box keeps flashing up, so that's why we're doing that, and hopefully introducing the rhinos to you now. And you'll all feel inspired to want to play your part in getting them back out into the wild. So talking of back out into the wild, Julia, we saw earlier on Storm, out looking at back out into the wild, and you obviously have to still monitor him, especially as you go through the sort of the dry periods of the year and make sure there's enough food for him. But a question we get asked a lot, and I suspect you get asked quite a lot, is has Storm found a lady friend yet?
Yeah, we have been asked that one before as well. So we have actually seen Storm with a female black rhino a couple of times. He is currently still too young to breed. He hasn't reached that age yet. So I think the area in which he kind of spends his time, it does have females in that area, but I think it will still be a couple of years before he's specifically looking for a lady friend.
Okay, so he's got a bit of time to go yet, and a bit of adapting to do. We've had a couple of questions come in asking about releases, and Meg, maybe you want to answer this as to whether there are any orphans that are due for release soon, and whether we have any orphans come in that we're just unable to release.
So yes, we are actually in talks now about potentially releasing Makosi and Mpilo, and they've bonded beautifully together, so they will be released together at the same time. So we're looking as early as this year, depending on what the weather does, and we've had really good rains and good winter rains, so could be as soon as September, October this year for Mpilo and Makosi. Mpilo is slightly younger, but he is quite a confident young man, so I think he'll do really well. So we'll just monitor them closely over the next couple of months and then make our decisions about Mpilo and Makosi. And then, yes, I think in other circumstances, there have been animals that have not been able to be released for various reasons, but we have not had that at our orphanage to date.
Okay, great. Yeah, so hopefully, there'll be others back out into the wild soon, and that's a great success story. As Mick said earlier, the aim of the orphanage is to release every single baby that we get in back out into the wild, and hopefully they go on and breed and continue the growth of the population within that area. And again, still links to the release, I guess, Meg. Obviously, the orphans are coming in from different reserves or parks in the area. So what is the protocol in terms of release back into those? Do they end up having to go back to the same place, or do we look at different areas where we can release them to?
That's a good question, Simon. So every individual and every group we have to look at separately. There's not sort of a standard answer as with most things in this field and in this industry. We do get calves from different reserves, and once the little calf has come in, our first goal is to stabilize the calf and then assess the situation. Once the calf has been stabilized and we've got a little bit more to go on, things like how old is the calf and what is its history, what is its background. Then we'll go into talks with the reserve that it initially came from. What we do is we ask for help with some funding so that animal can be, have a little bit of a financial backing from the reserve. If that's not possible and they're not able to assist us with the finances, then what we do is we take ownership of that calf and make sure that we cover all the costs, using money that comes in from donations and adoptions and so on and so forth. But ideally, we would like to send the animals back to the reserves where they are from. This sometimes works well, sometimes not, and that will depend on very much who that animal has bonded with in the time spent at the orphanage. So if you look at Mpilo and Makosi, for example, they've now created a beautiful bond, and they are originally from different reserves. So that would definitely take preference when we look at releasing them, that we would never separate them because they've already made this beautiful bond. So then we'll have to look at where the best release site will be in terms of things like water, is there a lot of grass in the area, what the post-release monitoring will be like on the reserve. So a lot of factors come into play when we look at where we're going to release the orphans in the future.
Great, thanks, Meg. So it sounds like it's definitely not an easy process, and I guess is very different each time. And I'm guessing as well, and I think we saw this with Storm when he was released. It wasn't a case of opening the gates and letting him out, because he's kind of used to that in the larger of the bomas. So it takes a bit of time for the rhinos to be brave enough to to make those steps back out into the wild, and when we know that they're ready. But Julia, let me just ask you another question we get asked quite a lot, around whether the rhinos have different personalities. So, are all rhinos the same, or can you really tell different personalities between the different rhinos? And then linked to that as well is, we saw Charlie and Moomin, the hippos, as well. So are they now separate, or do they still mix with each other? I mean, the hippos and the rhinos.
Yeah, I also definitely get asked that question a lot. The rhinos definitely all have individual personalities. Just like a human, it takes you more than 10 minutes or a day to learn their individual personality, because there's so many aspects that build up an individual personality. What I think is a lot easier to notice sometimes is the moods that they're in. Just like people, they go through quite a few different moods. They can be happy and playful. They might be tired and not have so much energy one day. And just like us, sometimes they just wake up on the wrong side of the bed and they can be grumpy and frustrated at almost everything. But yes, personality-wise, they definitely have their individual personalities. You definitely get the rhinos that are more outgoing and confident, and you get the guys that are a little bit more shy and want to keep back and keep away from people. And then just, with the hippos and the rhinos, as Megan has mentioned, obviously the goal for all of the animals at our facility is for them to be released back into the wild. And just because of that, to keep things as natural as possible, we have separated the rhinos and the hippos now, especially now that Charlie does have a hippo friend. And as I mentioned in our little intro video, he's learning to be a proper hippo. They're not completely separated in the sense that they do share a fence line. So the larger natural boma I was talking about earlier that the rhinos spend their daytimes in, this does share a fence line with the boma that our hippos stay in. However, most of the time during the day, the hippos are either in their dam or they undercover in the bushes. So it's not very often that they actually along the fence at the same time as what the rhinos would be.
Okay, so all part of growing up and becoming a hippo again. Okay, let me ask one last question. And I've said we've been asked a few questions quite a lot. This is without doubt the most common question we get asked, which is about volunteering. Helping rhinos, we get asked a lot about people wanting to come to volunteer, and lots of people, I must say, kind of lose interest a little bit when they realize it's not cuddling baby rhinos all day. So what about at the orphanage? Do you have any volunteer opportunities at the orphanage, Meg?
Simon, this is something that we have looked into, and we actually decided at the end of last year that it is a great opportunity for people to be part of the experience. That being said, we are very hands-off in our approach, and we keep saying that it is the fewer people that have interaction with these animals, the better it is for their release at the end of the day. So we've decided to offer a volunteer program, but it's very intimate. We only take 2 volunteers at a time. So this is really nice for the volunteer, and then also, the animals at the facility are not exposed to too many people. But we are now offering a volunteer program, 2 people at a time, and they can come along and help out with the daily activities at the orphanage. So with the carers, get to learn, what a day in the life of the carer is, and help with all the cleaning and the feeding and all that. So unfortunately now with the COVID-19 pandemic, things have been rather slow with all the borders being closed and no international people coming through the borders. But we do hope that in the future this will pick up. And if there is anyone that's watching and that would like a little bit more information, I think the easiest way is to go to our website. Our website's zululandconservationtrust.org, and you'll see some email addresses there. You can pop us an email and we can get into conversations about how to take it forward.
Great. So there may be opportunities for somebody to see how much like marshmallow in a fridge for a day and an avocado rhinos and hippos really are. Meg, you did just mention there sort of the impact of COVID-19. You know, what have you seen in terms of at the orphanage itself, the impact being?
So at the orphanage itself, pretty much things are as usual, business as usual. You know, the animals are certainly not impacted by borders being closed, not them directly. But I think it has had a huge impact on the carers. So carers are not able to go home and see their families, it's very tough, but they're very lucky that they have a family in the rhinos and hippos that are at the orphanage. And very passionate, dedicated and caring people. So South Africa has been in lockdown for a number of, well, not even weeks, months. And our carers have actually been in lockdown at the orphanage, which is great, you know, for the day-to-day of the orphanage, that there's a lot of consistency. And just a huge shout out to the people that are working there. And it's been tough on them, I know, but they are very lucky to be surrounded by such gorgeous animals. And then, of course, you know, things like our volunteer program has been impacted because of international volunteers not being able to come through. So I think our biggest thing now is to try to do things like this, like these live events, and get people to donate and adopt through helping rhinos. You know, small things, or not really small things, but other things that have been affected are the price of, for instance, the milk that we feed the rhinos. It's imported, and obviously the cost of all of these things is going up now. So we're going to need as much help as we can get from anyone and everyone that can help with donations and adoptions.
Okay, so yeah, we weren't going to touch too much on COVID-19 because obviously it has a lot of, you know, we've talked a lot around it, and there's a lot more information on our website, for example, on the impact of the coronavirus on conservation as a whole. So you know, if you'd like a bit more information, do go and check out the Helping Rhinos website. And we're going to draw this to a close now. So I will just say in closing that you can continue to find out a lot more information on either the Helping Rhinos social media pages, so on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Zululand Rhino Orphanage has an Instagram account and a Facebook page under the Zululand Conservation Trust. So you'll see lots more updates on the rhinos. And if you are and have been able to adopt one of the rhinos or even the hippos today, then you'll also get regular updates as well, letting you know what they've been up to, what each of the rhinos have been up to, what are the plans in terms of release, etc. So I guess just to finish off, thank you everybody for tuning in. Thank you for everybody for your comments on the YouTube and the Facebook post and I think the Twitter feed too. But most of all, thank you, Julia. Thank you, Meg, for not only for joining us today and bringing the orphans into everyone's home, but for everything that you're doing every single day, looking after the rhinos, keeping them healthy and keeping them safe. So hopefully if you've enjoyed it, do let us know through our social media or send us an email via the website, and we'll look to put more of these events on in the future. One thing I do just want to draw your attention to before we close is on Saturday, July the 18th of this year, at Helping Rhinos, we're putting on another event, streaming across all of our social media with Dr. William Folds, with an exclusive online rhino experience with Tandy, one of Tandy's calves, second calf. So Tandy was sort of the world famous poaching survivor who's gone on to have 3 calves. So we're really excited about that event as well, where we're going to take you sort of as if you were there standing side by side with the vet team. So stay tuned for more details on that as well. And hopefully we'll see you again soon. But Meg and Julia, thank you very much and goodbye.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you very much.